Okay, so here we are with the ADPTR Adapter Audio Utopia through Plugin Alliance. Now this is another reverb that is aimed at sound design, but also is versatile enough to cover other reverb duties as well. But this is a special one for a number of different reasons. It excels in sound design and ambient sounds, which you'll hear, and it does really well with other reverbs. You can use it for anything. It can do conventional reverbs very well, but it uses a completely different method of creating reverbs. It doesn't use the normal reflections approach. It uses a spectral approach, and although it can create really good reverbs like halls and so forth for drums or vocals or anything you like, it can do things with ambient approaches which are spectacular, and we'll hear some of that. Creating these videos takes significant time and effort. Supporters of the channel make it possible for me to continue to make more. If you find these videos useful and interesting, I invite you to support the channel. There are a range of things you can do. You can make a direct donation of any amount, become a monthly patron, buy some of my music, or buy some merchandise. I also have a range of courses available that cover all essential aspects of mixing, from getting started right up to advanced techniques. Links to everything are in the video description below. And finally, click that like and subscribe button. Thanks. So I will start by playing through some guitar. And before we do that, I'm just going to mention, I'm going to go through all the controls here in a bit, but I'm just going to mention one in particular that really makes this reverb stand out. And it's not the only one that does by any stretch, but is one particular control which really sets this one apart from any other reverb, and that is this auto clear. So one of the problems, if you've ever done work with ambient reverbs that have very long decay times, so you're creating kind of like an ambient bed of reverb. I've talked in previous videos about how difficult it is to find a reverb that's really good at sustaining the notes that you play into it as distinct notes, and there are some that can do that, and I reviewed recently a couple of the Aura from Plugin Alliance as well, BX Aura, and also the Eventide Black Hole Immersive, which are both really good at doing that. And this one is also a standout one for doing that as well. But the problem you run into when you're using reverbs for that is that if you're playing a chord into it, and then it's sustaining, and then you play another chord that's like a key change, as you often get, you're going to get clashes because the old chord's notes are going to overlap in the reverb with the new ones, and you're going to get this clash. And it's a major problem. And the way I've always gotten around that is using pedals. So controller pedals that do a bunch of fairly complicated things to change the send amount and the reverb time, and whether it's on, setting it on infinite and setting the thresholds of those controls in various places so that I can just step on a pedal and it will deal with that problem and pull back and pull forward with it. And it works, but it's always something that is tricky to set up, and you can get it wrong by just getting it wrong with your foot. And what's amazing about this is it's built into this auto clear. What it does is it looks for clashing frequencies, and it just seems to do a brilliant job of pulling out clashing notes. So it can listen for notes that clash with the notes of the next chord, and basically it just clears those out when the new chord comes in and favors the new notes. It's fantastic. You'll hear that. So that's why I'm explaining this before you listen to this piece of guitar, because there are three sections, as you can see here, and each one is just playing single note lines, but they represent chords, and you'll hear between them that the chord created by those notes sustains until you hit the next bunch of notes, which create a new chord, and you'll hear how the chord just changes and the old chord disappears, and it doesn't carry across and clash, which it would do very badly without this auto clear. So just to let you know before we play it, and now I'll play through that, and you can have a listen to the sound of it. So you can hear it's a beautiful sounding ambient reverb, and it just sustains those chords. It pulls the chords beautifully out of the notes that are being played. And you can hear it sustaining really nicely between each set of notes. And that was entirely created by the notes played. Although it sounds like a pad created by playing a chord, it isn't. It's just created by what was played, single note-wise on the guitar. And you can hear how beautifully it pulls those notes out. And then how, when it moves to the next chord, represented by those notes, it doesn't overlap. It creates a beautiful change of chord. Really amazing. No other reverb I've seen can do that. There are some other reverbs that have something a little bit similar to this, but it doesn't work anything like as well as this does. So, yeah, amazing. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to go through the controls, and then we'll look in a little bit more detail about what those do. So I'm not going to go through this in exhaustive detail because it's deep. There's a lot here, and it would take quite a long time to go through it all, and there's going to be other videos out there. In fact, I think Adapter have some of their own that goes through the controls in some detail. So I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to roughly go through them with you so you can get a rough idea of what it does. So starting here in the middle, we've got decay, which does what you'd think it would do, although I would say that like every other control in this, it sometimes does unexpected and kind of mysterious things, depending on how other things are set. And that's a characteristic of this reverb overall, and I don't mean that as a criticism, I mean it as a good thing, is that because it's using spectral processing rather than reflections, the interactions you get with controls create some unexpected but sometimes quite wonderful effects. And the decay sometimes does more than just pull the decay down, it changes the sound as well, depending on what algorithm's being used and how the other controls are set. Sometimes it just pulls the decay time down, as you heard me do a minute ago, and other times it does other things as well. And that's true of quite a few of the other controls as well. So, starting on the left here, we've got pre-delay, that's straightforward. Width, you can change the width, narrow it, widen it, and also there's a lot more to a lot of these controls than you get from this one dial, which we'll look at later. You can go into more detail there. Elsewhere, shape control. Now this is an interesting one. It's not unique to this reverb, but this particular shape control is. So shape control, go back to the Lexicon reverbs. Lexicon has had a shape control way back since the 80s and possibly even before then. It's certainly a feature of all their 80s, 90s, and current reverbs, at least the top end of their reverbs. And they usually have a spread control as well, and it allows you to change the shape of the reverb as it comes in. So it's not the pre-delay, it's how the reverb builds up. Does it build up suddenly? Does it gradually build up? And then after it's reached its peak, how does it come down into the tail? Does it decay kind of in a linear way across the tail, or does it come down quickly and then even out into a tail at a lower volume? What does it do? That envelope, that shape, is what the shape control and the lexicons do in combination with the spread control. But in here we've got a shape control which does something kind of similar to that, but depending again on the algorithm, it can do more than that. It can change the tone as well quite dramatically sometimes, and sometimes it's just more subtle. But that's the general idea of what it does. It controls the envelope. You've got a freeze button here, which is helpful. We've got a mix control, and you can lock this, and I believe you can lock all the parameters by right-clicking, which is really welcome. Early reflection and tail separate controls, which is great, because if I'm working with an ambient reverb like this, I probably don't want early reflections, because that's what gives you that sense of being in a room and the size of a room. And if what I want is a kind of ambient pad like bed, I don't necessarily want that, so nice to be able to bring that down. But most reverbs these days have that. So now we've got this motion section. It's got detune, which again, this is the amount of detune, but there's more to it. There's more detail that we'll look at in a minute that you can get into with this. And then shimmer, same thing. This is a shimmer control. That again, there's more detail we'll look at in a minute. Very nice sounding shimmer. It doesn't sound like your usual pitch shift fed into the reverb. It sounds like there's something a lot more subtle going on there and more interesting. Jumping over to the right here, mix controls, got the auto clear I've talked about, and we've got ducking control. It can also do things like gating and pumping, which we'll look at. And then we've got the section here called color, and this is where the kind of spectral engine, you have access to that here, or parts of it. So again, we're going to look a little bit at that. So the two that really affect it in a big way are these two here. Starting with the spectral here. Now this, there are hidden away, and you could easily miss this, there are a lot of different algorithms in here. Now you can't access them in the conventional way, but we're going to look at how you do access them. But whichever algorithm, whichever spectral algorithm you've got selected, this changes it. It's not an amount control, it's like a quality, it changes the quality of it. In some of quite a lot of the different algorithms, moving to the left emphasizes more of the kind of transient and noise-like elements of the sound, and moving to the right emphasizes more the tonal note type elements. But that's not always true. Depending on the algorithm, it will do different things. But the idea is that you move this around and get variations on whatever algorithm you've selected. Then we've got pre-EQ, and what this does is something very similar to the Liquid Sonics Tai Chi reverb, where as you change this around, it's like an EQ, it changes the amount of reverb decay time in the different frequencies. So I bring this up, I'm going to get more reverb time in this frequency area or less. And so you can seriously shape the reverb sound here. You can really change it dramatically into something completely different. It's not an EQ, it's the reverb time. And also, if you boost them up, you find that you get resonances happening in those areas that you wouldn't otherwise get. So again, you get all kinds of really cool, interesting stuff happening with this control. And what this does is it changes the amount of the whole thing. Then here you've got a post EQ, and this is just a conventional EQ after the reverb. Again, just very useful, but straightforward. And before we get into the details here, because this is the kind of detailed section, I'm going to explain about the algorithms, because I was kind of confused by this to begin with. But once you understand it, it's easy to use and straightforward. It's just not immediately obvious how this works, or at least it wasn't to me, but I'll explain it. So you've got two patch browsers here. One up here, which acts like the patch browser for patches, just like you'd expect. It's a really good patch browser with lots of categories. You can make your own categories. You can select by decay time. You've got all sorts of great stuff here. Really nicely done. Like everything in this plugin, every control is so well thought out and so well implemented. It's just really finely crafted. So this is a patch browser, as you'd expect. And when you select one of these patches, you will get changes to every one of these parameters, as you'd expect. But down here, we've got another patch browser, and it looks the same, but it's not the same. And this is where I got confused. What this does is it just selects algorithms. Now, why are we seeing all the patch names? It's because every patch has its own algorithm variation. Now, we don't get the ability to go in and mess with the controls to vary the algorithms. That's something the developers had access to that we don't. And so they have built a whole bunch of different variations which are accessible and built in permanently to these different patches. So by selecting this patch, for example, I haven't changed any of these controls. They're all set up just how I had them. But what's changed is the algorithm behind this spectral control and the decay. These two things change, and they're built in to these kind of, you could think of them as sort of like a sub-patch within a patch. So again, if I go back to this patch browser, each one of these patches has in it its own algorithm, as I just showed you, and it changes not only that, but it changes all the controls, whereas this patch browser only changes the algorithm within it. It draws the algorithm out of each of those patches without drawing the rest of the patch with it. So all of these controls will stay the same. just the algorithm gets pulled out of it into whatever patch you've already got loaded. So it's a way that you can flick through set up your patch how you want it, and then flick through all the different algorithms to hear what they sound like within your patch. And once you've got one that you think you like, you can then vary it here and so forth, and then maybe try a different one. Then you save it as a patch, and as you see, I've got a bunch here I've saved, and it saves the whole patch, including the algorithm that you selected. So they both get saved, and when I go down here, I'll also get access to all the patches that I saved, and what I'm really getting is just the algorithms from the patches. They're algorithms I got originally from the factory ones, but they're ones I've embedded into each of these patches. So I hope that makes sense. I think it would be, once you get used to it, by the way, it's very quick and easy to use. It works really well. You just have to kind of grasp the concept of it. Now, I think it would be great if you could get into the controls that the developers had access to in order to mess around with the details of the different algorithm variations. I realize, of course, that might not be possible or practical, because sometimes with these things, it just isn't. It requires like special technical knowledge in order to kind of be able to tweak those controls. And so if that's the case, I would understand why it just needs to be that way. But if it would be possible to do that, I think it would be great to give us another panel of detailed control over the algorithms in a future update. And maybe you could have something like within this expert section where it says spectral, maybe a button that then click on that and you get another whole screen here with other controls that allow you to mess about and tweak the algorithm. But I do understand why that might not be possible. So now that we're in here, I'm going to show you as quickly as I can, because I don't want to spend too much time, just briefly some of the detailed controls you get. You've got the ability to what it's called pump, or kind of emphasize the reverb based on trigger, either the time trigger or side chain. You've got a gate, which again, there's a lot of control here. You can change the shape of the gate and so forth. It's a rhythmic gate, rhythmic pump, or you can duck. And again, you can control the envelope, and it's really nicely done. All of these are really nicely done. And then you've got access to these that I've showed you already. You can also get to by clicking on them here. And then in here, we've got a buffer you can mess around with. And you've got the expert mode here, which gives you more detailed control, as I was mentioning as I went through these. Many of them have detailed control. So for example, early reflections, you've got the amount here, but you can also choose different reflections algorithms here. And you can, if you chose this tweak mode here, you can change the detune and diffusion amount and low and high cut and amount of stereo on there. So there's a lot of control there. I said I wasn't going to go through the details, and here I am going through them, so I'm going to try not to do that. Same idea with the spectral control. When you've chosen an algorithm, you've got variants on it, and you can change the block size, which changes the whole sound of it a lot, and that's a great control to mess with. Same thing with detune. You've got a lot of variation. Same thing with shimmer, various different shimmer algorithms, various different stereo algorithms, and it very helpfully, if you mouse over it, shows you down at the bottom exactly what these different things do. So a lot of tweakability there. Now, before we move on to the drums, I'm just going to do a bit of messing around with some of these so you can hear what it sounds like in an ambient context. So I'm just going to play through this section of guitar that's going to just play it's a single note lines that are basically a major chord, a major seventh or a major ninth chord. So it's fairly pleasant sounding and not too weird of a chord that you can listen to as I tweak these controls. So I'll start with flicking through some of the algorithms so you can hear what they're like. little taste there of just how much variation there is. There's a huge amount of variation under the hood here. And what I would recommend you do if you are getting to know this reverb is to find a patch or create a patch that's roughly what you're after in terms of the length of the reverb and other parameters. And then just go through this and start going through every one of these algorithm variations and listen to them and pick out the ones you like and then save them as presets. It's time well worth spending that time on that. So yeah, I highly recommend this reverb. I think it's an excellent addition to the reverb offerings out there. It has some really unique features, especially for sound design. And one of the things I like about it is it's got this really kind of almost organic moving aspect to it. It moves around the stereo field and the sound changes and different aspects of the tone emerge as the reverb decays in a way that I've not heard from any other reverb. It's really quite a sort of organic, changing, very subtly beautiful ambient reverb. So yeah, I would highly recommend this reverb for sound design, and it's also very capable for other reverb duties for pretty much any instrument. So I hope you find this useful, and hope to see you next time.